I attended the most recent meeting on the 6th, on Monday of this week. And they had 2 speakers there. There were no public speakers. Most of the meetings have included homeowners who have come in and described really problematic situations with their HOAs, with their boards, with vendors, with attorneys, with management companies. But this time there were no public speakers, but there were 2 content experts that spoke, and I'd like to just summarize what they talked about. The first one was Daniel Lightfoot with the League of Minnesota Cities, and that is a wonderful, it's a very large organization. There are 856 cities in Minnesota, and the League includes 841. So you're all probably, your cities are probably part of that league, and they are very interested in what's happening with HOAs for a number of reasons. He explained that developers, they provide the plans for the HOAs according to the city subdivision and zoning ordinances. And those developments often include common areas. And it's those common areas that are of most interest to the cities. The Minnesota Common Interest Ownership Act requires that those properties be managed by a homeowner association that's elected, with an elected board of directors, like us. He explained that the cities do not require that a subdivision be formed as an HOA. He explained that that's required by Minnesota statute, MCIOA, not by the city. So that sometimes gets described that way. The cities cannot and do not have authority to require HOAs, is what he said. The city's main interest is in the effective management of the private common properties within the HOAs. And he mentioned pools, parks, playgrounds, clubhouses, roads, stormwater ponds. So that's where the city's interest lies. And they don't enforce HOA governing documents. They do enforce city ordinances, but they don't enforce our own governing documents. And they don't influence how the governing documents are written when the developer creates the HOA. He also mentioned that 28 cities participate in what's called the Just Deeds Project. And that's a project that looks at property records to look for discriminatory language. And that was common throughout the country, I think, in parts of Minnesota many years ago. But some of those covenants still exist, the discriminatory language, and there's an effort to identify those and sort of remove them from the property records. So they participate in that. And the other important thing that cities do voluntarily is they participate in the Housing Improvement Area Loan Program, the HIA program. That program allows cities to loan money to HOAs who are in a situation of deferred maintenance, huge costs from deferred maintenance, or maybe have some other large expense that they cannot fund. So if your city participates in the Housing Improvement Area Loan Program, you're able to get loans from the city. The city finances the work up front, and it's repaid through the homeowner's property taxes. And I know from speakers at meetings I've heard that Edina, for example, is one of those cities, and I believe Fridley is one of those cities. So that's a very, very important thing to know about if your HOA gets in a situation where you're looking for funding for a huge project that you just cannot manage. His first recommendation was that the state establish oversight of HOAs to ensure that there's adequate resources available to them, that they clarify the role of the HOA relationship with the association management companies, and that they work to eliminate the discriminatory practices, and that the HOAs focus on maintaining the common area properties, improve transparency and communications with homeowners, and that really is quite basic. That comes up in many of our meetings, the importance of communications. Promote the use of alternative dispute resolution before things heat up so much that they end up in a lawsuit, that you work through a mediation process. Maintain the city's ability to ensure that there's proper maintenance of common areas. Provide education for HOA board leaders and homeowners. And then establish a database of HOAs with their board leaders as a reference for cities. And cities are increasingly getting complaints and questions from homeowners who are unable to resolve a concern within their HOA. They call the Attorney General's office, or they call their city, and they talk to somebody at the city. And the cities don't know what to do, and they don't know who to refer the problems to. So it's really is becoming a problem, and that's one of the reasons that drove, I believe, the creation of this work group, is that legislators were getting repeated calls from homeowners with concerns, and there is not a mechanism to manage those concerns. It just gets worked out however it does, with many different settings. Okay, that was Mr. Lightfoot from the League of American Cities. The other speaker was Phaedra Howard, and she's a well-known attorney with Helmuth and Johnson. She also talked, the topic of this whole meeting was about cities' relationship with HOAs. So she talked a little bit about that also. She said that HOAs benefit both developers and cities. Creation of HOAs allows, developers can create neighborhoods or subdivisions with greater density. They can sell more homes in a certain geographic area. Cities benefit because the HOA assumes some management and maintenance costs and responsibilities that are otherwise assumed by cities. So both HOAs and cities benefit from us HOAs. She said that HOA board leaders are generally not prepared for the authority and the duties that we assume when we join the board. And I do believe that's true, and I think that's come up in many of our meetings as well. The problem areas she noted was that cities often don't provide enough oversight on the development when the property is being built. She cited how the site preparation is done, maybe some building practices. And what happens is, if the city doesn't provide the adequate oversight, it comes back to the HOAs as construction defect concerns, or there's drainage problems that are happening that are causing problems for the HOA. So the city's oversight is very important. She said sometimes developers don't set up initial funding, adequate funding for reserves, and they set a practice of keeping assessments lower, and if that's carried forward, the reserves aren't funded properly. There's also limited police response in HOAs, often because what happens in the HOAs, unless you're violating a city ordinance or some kind of criminal activity, it's considered a problem for the HOA to manage. So one of her recommendations is to have more police response if needed. And then finally, her recommendations were for more consistent participation by the cities. Their firm works with cities throughout the state. She said that with the HOAs throughout the state, she said the city oversight and relationships with HOAs varies tremendously throughout the state. There's really not a lot of consistency. We estimate that there are around 3,800 HOAs, townhome, condominium, and cooperative HOAs here in our metro area, 7-county metro, with about 197,000 housing units. And we estimate that there's probably 15,000 board leaders in the metro area from those HOAs. So there's a very significant part of our housing stock, and these cities recognize that. Cities are requiring homeowners to document compliance. One of the things that came up was a homeowner would go to the city, get a permit to do a project, and then go back to the HOA, and it had not been approved by their architectural review committee. And they might begin the work, they get contractors out there, and they find out in hindsight that they didn't get the proper architectural review committee approval. She said that the cities need to ask for that up front before they issue the building permits. And then the other thing, the final thing was that sometimes our governing documents don't permit a board to take action unless they get like 100% of homeowners to agree to the actions. And she said that should be removed because in some cases it could be one homeowner that prevents a really important board action, and the board should be able to override that requirement in certain emergency situations. So the work group, that's from the January 6th meeting. The work group is meeting now for its, the last actual working group meeting is today. And then going forward, there'll be 2 additional meetings where they're collecting recommendations from all of the people who have spoken, all of the homeowners. They'll try to work those into recommendations to make to the legislature, which is due by the end of this month. The chair, Representative Kristen Boehner, does anticipate that there will be legislation introduced that will amend or change the current Minnesota Common Interest Ownership Act. So stay tuned. I think that over the next few months we'll see legislation coming up in the legislature that will affect us. So we do plan to be able to follow it and follow up on reporting on that.